I don't know if you're like me. It's probably good for you if you're not. But I find myself, I don't really let other people determine what I listen to when I'm driving anymore, and I drive a lot. So my phone, who knows how many songs I've got stacked up in a photo. Every once in a while, one comes on that I hadn't heard in a while, and I'm just like, what a great song. And so I have to stop and do my, I'll listen to it probably 3 or 4 or 5 times in a row. And the other day, Ticket to Ride, not the Beatles version, but Karen Carpenter. The Carpenters covered Ticket to Ride, and it's so different in feel and texture, and it's almost like a ballad when she
Oh
does it.
yeah.
And I braggingly tell people my wife's the only person I know that sings as well as Karen Carpenter, or did. But that girl could sing. And as I've learned as we've gone on, she could also play lots of stuff.
Hmm.
Even recently, I see a ton of people comparing her to some of the best drummers ever, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, she was an incredible percussionist.
So, as I started thinking about that and know that we had a tragic ending to her life, I actually saw somebody post once. I wish she loved herself as much as we did. And you kind of wander around in your brain thinking that genius or that thing that she had that made her so special might have made her feel alone sometimes, or led to some of that negative self-image because she didn't see what the rest of us saw. And so, it's kind of a dark thought to start with. But what I'm trying to get to is I think in band programs and orchestra programs, choir, all the places, there are those kids sitting in your group, and it hits you one day, they're, they're really gifted. They're really pretty talented. Would you agree with that? Or did you have those? Both of you guys had groups, so I'm asking you, did you have that moment where you went, that kid's good?
Oh yeah, no doubt about that. I'll give you one really easy example. A young boy was a trumpet player in my band at Wiley by the name of Luke McMillan.
Okay.
And now he owns his own music publishing company and writes marching shows for bands across the nation. So
Right.
but I didn't recognize that at first. I was signing my contract, and Lewis Thornton was in the office, and we were talking. And then Luke went over and started playing the piano. And usually if a kid just starts playing the piano, you tell him get off the piano, right? And Lewis looked at me and goes, "No, when Luke plays the piano, it's okay." And so Luke was over there playing piano. Said he goes, "That kid is a musical genius." Said, "Make sure to nurture that ability level and nurture it." Man, he just made my band incredible. He was just a great leader and so forth. But yes, and sometimes you see it all the way in Rusty. We'll get you an introduction here in a second. But sometimes you see that in beginner band. You'll have one little kid in your trumpet section. You're going, "Oh my goodness, this kid's something." So what do you
Well,
think, Rusty?
well, let me jump in there and say that if you don't know the other guy sitting in with us today, this is Rusty Gray. Uh, and again, Rusty and Mike sit in the lap of luxury in their retirement years and rock on the porch and talk about the good old days, which is not true of either of them.
Yeah, and make lots of doctor appointments.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
But Rusty and I go way back. I think a lot of people that hear the name will go, "Oh, wow, there's Rusty." But uh, tell us, you living in North Carolina now?
Yeah, my son lives up here in Asheville, and so when I decided to retire, we went, let's it was a big jump, you know what I mean? It was like, oh my gosh, but we found a beautiful place on the hill here, and I look out my front door and I see mountains. And now the only negative is I have to mow 4 acres of grass. So
But you
I
got a
thought,
tractor, right?
oh yeah, I do. But
There's a visual for all our friends. Rusty on a tractor.
yeah, but I will.
Green Acres is the place to be.
That's exactly what I feel like. When you spend 4 hours on a weed eater, it's like that's a little too much. I used to have this comment all the time. It said, "My vision of hell is pushing a lawnmower, and as I go down a row, it's growing faster behind me than I'm
Behind you.
mowing." And here I am in retirement, and I mow at least 2 days a week. So,
Oh Lord.
no, it was a great move for me and my family. My daughter lives in Chicago. My son lives in Asheville, and so it's easier for me to get to Chicago from here. And it's been a great move. Texas needs to understand, and I hope they do, how incredible the band programs are, and how many great people teach bands around the state. We always tend to focus on a few of the great teachers. You know what I mean? They're everywhere. There are great teachers. In Odessa, there's great teachers. There's great teachers everywhere. I was fortunate enough to work with many great teachers. My first boss was J.R. McIntyre, and Charles Nell was my high school director when I taught at Bonham. I taught with Ross Grant in DeSoto, great teacher. He taught me how different people can be successful in different ways of teaching. So I learned that different ways of teaching were, it's really strong teachers. They're just everywhere, right? So, and then
would you say it this way, Rusty? Would you say, and this is an appreciation because we do kind of know that I look at where people listen to this and I'm like, wow. But the floor in Texas is a lot higher
100%
than the floor, maybe some other places.
Yeah, because and I'm sure every director can kind of do this, talk about where they've taught and the great teachers that they were with that people don't know their names.
Right.
There's so many great teachers. Just because you don't win honor band doesn't mean you're not a great teacher. And you might be a great teacher of character. You might be a great teacher for that community. You might be a great teacher for just for the moment, right? There might be a few kids that you just totally inspire that become teachers or become great in their field, and you were the reason they did.
Right, you were in the right place at the right time for that kid.
Right. There's we measure teachers the wrong way sometimes. I just chased a rabbit, but that's all right.
That's cool. But let's pop back over to the I call it the superstar, and that's probably unfair to everybody to call it that. But that kid that's sitting there, Rusty, when you recognize, no, that's different.
Yeah, I call it. I taught middle school. I did teach some high school, but I taught middle school pretty much my whole career. And I think finding those superstars was almost my number one goal. Because they're there. They're always there. Every band program has a superstar or two or three or four, maybe, right? And finding them is the key, and recognizing certain things. Number one, just natural ear talent. In other words, they hear things. And so the first thing I would always do in beginning band is kind of have them they would laugh, but I'd have them sing stuff. And I'm not worried about tone quality. I'm worried about let's hear what you can do. Let's hear your natural pitch. Do you hear things? Second thing I would do is find natural rhythm. How are you naturally rhythmically? Do you naturally feel it? Now that can be rhythm can be a trap. So you got to be careful. One of the best players I ever taught was in Greenwood, sax player, brilliant, Daniel Powell. I don't know if you know him. He used to teach at University of Miami, I think, on saxophone. Couldn't tap his foot and play to save his life. At marching field, I remember many days on the marching field just going nuts about, you're out of step. And
how can you be out of step?
Yeah, brilliant player. Brilliant player. The next things that I start doing once they have the ability to start playing songs, I would play. I'm a piano player also, and so I would play piano along with them on their little beginner lines, right? And then I would go to a minor key on them. I would mess with them, and I would change things around on them. And the really good players perked up, and they really liked it, And but then, how do they start when they play a line? How do they sound when they play the line? Are they trying to make it sound good? I am not a believer in the blow your face off beginner band. That's just me. I started teaching that way, but I believe good tone quality can happen early. And I think the earlier they get it, you need to push it, push it, push it.
Rusty, I'm going to
Because
even jump in there and say I don't know that can is the word I would use. I think it should start every sound you make.
oh
We had a conversation. Was that Lindsay we were talking to that said we're not going to go on till you make that sound pretty, or you need to? Mike, is that what she said?
Yeah,
Everything we do, you got to make the best sound you
well,
can make.
tone is job one. It
number
it
one.
trumps everything that happens in beginner band. So I'm with Rusty on that. I am not a, and I went through the same cycle. I think we both did.
Yeah.
Whereas like play as strong as you can and back them off later.
Mm-hmm.
No, I guess it sort of worked, but I really liked it when we got to the point to where we weren't doing it in that manner. The things I used to kind of figure it out, two things. One was just simply giving each student a grade and hearing them at least once every 3 days.
Yeah.
And so you could tell the perfectionist kind of mentality when it's like, Mr. Lenny, you gave me a 99. What did I do wrong? The other
Yeah,
thing,
I love that. I love that.
so I would keep a file, a document in the old days of paper on what I called my superstars. And the other thing was I did an exercise with them after they learned, the first 5 notes and quarter notes and half
Mm-hmm.
notes. And their next test to play, they had to write their own music line.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, okay, you can use these values, these rests, these notes. Make up a line, and I'm going to grade you on your line, and not whether it's composed well, but just how you play it. And boy, you really see the superstars kind of jump out quickly because they will work until their fingers bleed to to make something that's presentable. And then other kids, I call them the chicken fries. They're in marching band to get the chicken fried steak on Friday night. I call them the chicken fries. And the chicken fries are like, yeah, whatever. I'll honk a few notes and he'll give me an 80 and life will be good and I'll go to lunch. So that was my take on it. There's much more than that, but that was my first thing because I always taught the high school band, and I was the head director. A really stupid way of doing it. I was never an assistant, and that's really dumb.
Right.
So you guys out there don't do that, but I always taught beginners. Even my last year, I taught all the beginning brass players, and there's like 95 of them in 3 periods. And so I felt like that was really important that they see me, but I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I enjoyed teaching the beginners more. Sorry, my old high school students. I enjoyed teaching the beginners more because you could figure out, like Rusty's talking about, what gifts do these kids have?
Right.
Leadership, playing, etc. So I'll toss it back just with that little bit of input.
Well,
Well,
let's just roll on that. Go ahead, Rusty. You got something?
yeah. I ask, and I always felt my number one job as a middle school teacher, a band director, was to feed the high school. Number one, 100%. If my kids would move up to the high school and they were successful, that was my number one job. Number
Mm-hmm.
one, not to win honor band, not to do any of that stuff. It's to feed the high school. I ask every one of when I would get a new band director in, Van Ragsdale or whoever, Scott Mason, I said, what do you want from me as a middle school teacher? Because I'm here to help you. Right. And every one of them, the first thing out of their mouth was tone, number one. And so people always ask me, why does I didn't have the cleanest of bands, and I know that. People will tell you that, but they sounded great. I mean, they sounded incredible. And I always say, because that's my number one job. Yeah, maybe I'm not teaching them to clean this up. My articulation's not great sometimes, which articulation and tone run together, but that's another conversation. But I my number one job, they all said, if they can play some basic scales, 6, 7, 8, and they have a good rhythmic, solid, just bass, and if their tones are great, that's all I need.
Well,
And
this
you
is
know
the
what?
other thing I'll say about Rusty Gray bands, and I've heard them for a long time, that they sounded great, but they also, you never thought these kids are scared. They
Mm-mm.
just straight up sat up and went, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
And so they were very confident with great
Well,
tone. So
we were talking about these superstar kids, And one of the traits of a superstar kid, now that we're going to go into the perfectionism stuff for a little bit, um, is they'll be great one day. I mean, incredible. And you'll go, wow, what, wow. And then the next week, they're terrible. They'll have these up and downs because they're really into it one minute, then all of a sudden that fear of failure sneaks in that perfectionists have. And instead of facing the fear, they tend to totally back off the fear. You know what I mean? They're not going to do it. They don't want that feeling anymore, right? So for us as band directors, we have to start recognizing who's having these waves of going in and out, and they'll also be your kid that sometimes will, I love band. Next week, I'm quitting band. I love band. I'm quitting band. And so they bounce back and forth, and you're going, what is this?
So are you talking about the students or the directors?
Yeah.
No, well, I love band. I'm quitting band.
I'm quitting band. I hate it. Well, right now in May is every director saying they're quitting right now.
Yeah, that's right.
This is the toughest month. But no, it is that wave that they go through because they love the success of it, but they fear they're not going to do it again.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So,
and I think a real important critique on that, or an idea about that, high achievers, they're pulled towards their goals by the desire to achieve them.
Right.
Perfectionist, I mean, they're pushed towards their goals by the fear of failure.
Right.
And when I look at these characteristics, I find that I had more of a perfectionist attitude than I had a high achiever attitude. Mm-hmm. And I don't say that with any pride. I think it was detrimental to what I did as a band director, but I'm a fear of failure guy. Man, I am. There's no doubt about that. I'm not a high achiever guy. I'm a fear of failure. Am I going to screw up? Imposter syndrome. Every time I do an all region band and I pull up in my car in that parking lot, I'm thinking, is this going to be the time? Are they going to finally catch the fact that I don't know what I'm doing? And then by the end of the concert, everything went well and everybody had a good time. And I get in my car and I just go, I didn't fail.
Yep.
It wasn't helped a band achieve something well. It was, I did not fail. And I think that's something we got to address in our perfectionist kids.
I agree 100%. Derrick, you want to go? All right.
Yeah, I was going to say that I'm kind of that kid you guys are talking about from this. I don't want people to watch me learn something. I don't want people to listen to the mistakes it takes to become good at something. I want people to hear the best thing I can do instantly. And it just doesn't work that way. We all know that. But I was that kid that would, instead of you hearing me be bad, I'd just rather not play.
Right.
I can make great sounds. You taught me how to do this. I'm a decent player. But I don't need you to hear me sight read something because technically I struggle sometimes with rhythm. And I don't want everybody else to go, what an idiot. And that's what I thought everybody was doing.
Yeah.
So,
and that is a perfectionist attitude where you're more concerned with the results than the process.
Yep. When I first discovered perfectionism, healthy is good. Mm-hmm. You can be a healthy perfectionist. Getting there and understanding, that's just the way I feel because I am this perfectionist, and learning how to deal with it. That perfectionism drive is much like an achiever. They're very similar. When I was first figured this out, I was listening to a podcast. I was riding my road bike. I got on it and I put on a podcast. I said, well, I'll watch this perfectionism thing, right? I had to pull over and stop. And I was almost in tears going, oh my gosh, this is me. I didn't realize that what I used to think was a badge of honor, this perfectionism, was actually a weight. I didn't realize it was causing me to procrastinate things sometimes. It caused me not to go after things. It caused me, certain pieces of music scared me. You know what I mean? I just wouldn't do it because I was afraid that, I can't touch that piece of music, And Derrick knows I'm not afraid to play a hard piece of music when I know for sure we can do it. But some of being a good band director is that I'm not 100% sure we can do this, but we can learn it together, kind of a thing. So
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in real quick, Chris, because I think you've already alluded to this, and I think Michael jump on with this as well. I think that you got to a point where you would do that when you realized that that trophy wasn't as important as the experience of
yes,
learning that
right.
stuff together.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I did Magnolia Star, which is a really fun piece with my middle school. And we did it because it was fun. And I didn't care if what we won or not. I knew I had the players to play it. It wasn't going to win anything because it was too tricky, but it, it was great. It was a
Yeah.
lot of fun. I've done Italian in Algiers with the middle school. And actually, that band was might have been as good as some of my Bonham bands, maybe. So, but you learn that the teaching of the piece, the music becomes your competition, not the rating, not the honor band. The music is what you're after, right? And teaching a kid that, hey, this isn't about you winning or losing. This is about how well we play in that moment. And it's okay to be disappointed. It's okay to regret a moment. Those things are all healthy feelings. Now, don't dwell on them. Let's leave them behind, right? And but as a teacher, as the director of a perfectionist or any, well, I think this is healthy for all students to think this way. That these are the way these are the things we feel as musicians, and it's okay to feel that way. It's
Mhm.
okay. Now, let me help you through it. This is how you get over it. You get better prepared so it doesn't happen next time.
And see, I love that because that's kind of what I'm saying. Especially, you know, in college, I was in a pretty competitive environment for trumpet players,
Yeah,
and
yeah, you are.
they were more interested in seeing how bad you were, so they could feel, see, I am that good.
Yeah.
And we tease that trumpet mentality all the time. But it was about that point that I just couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't live with the, why do I have to prove this to you when all I want to do is enjoy being in band? Because I've told both of you guys before, I would still march in a marching band if they had an old geezer marching band and I thought I could actually do it. But that, I don't think it probably originated as a fear of failure, but it kind of became there's nothing I can do that's going to be impressive enough that other people will go, good job. Everybody's looking for a reason to say that was bad. So I don't know if that fits into your perfectionist thought processes or how to help a perfectionist, because that's really where I'm trying to get here is how do we help those kids? How do we
Yeah.
get those kids past that fear of failure into a healthy place of I love to make music?
Yeah. There's two thoughts on this. Number one, you've got to figure out where the perfectionist is coming from. Is it parent driven? In certain cultures, shaming the family is a real deal. But the other side of that is they don't even know what they've got. You know what I mean? You have to learn to deal with them.
They don't realize they're that good or that they're battling
They're
that.
that they're battling that, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know that's what I was battling. Did you? I mean, you guys probably didn't know y'all were battling that at the time.
Right. That's
Uh,
exactly right.
yeah, you don't know. Derrick, you brought up a point at the very beginning that strikes a chord with me, and it's the worst thing a band director can live through. And I have a student that went to Boston Conservatory, a great trumpet player, committed suicide during COVID, and he was a perfectionist. There's no question. And what really made me dive into this stuff is could I have did I hurt that or did I help that? Right.
Did I
You know what I
foster
mean?
that
Yeah. Yeah.
perfectionism? Yeah.
Yeah. What did I do? Was I a part of this thing? Did I not help him in a ways that I could? Now I'm not taking the blame for,
No,
I
I
mean,
get
I
it.
don't
But
feel
there's
that.
your perfectionist showing. Did I
Right.
teach him right?
Right. But it's a real deal. I mean, these kids need, I mean, did the band world support this kid in the proper way? And it might have. It might have. It just made me think, right? It made
Right.
me think that man, what if he would have known, hey, you're this kind of person. Here are some steps that you need to take care of yourself better. In other words, you've got to understand that mistakes happen. Band
Right.
directors forget to tell students, hey, every performance there's going to be a problem. I
It's
hope band
part of
directors,
it, right?
it's part of it. However, how you recover is more important. Make that. I remember we did. I think I was doing variations on a Korean folk song, and in the middle of it, I don't know what happened. I have no idea what happened. I think we added four measures to it somehow. And you know what? I teaching the kids that recovery is more important than the performance at times. Recovery, 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 right? And it was so funny. The judges, nobody caught it. Nobody caught the mistake. Nobody's not one judge made a comment about it.
Just a couple of extra pentatonic riffs in there.
I don't, it wasn't four measures. I think it was four beats, but it was still like, it was still like, it's like, I mean, so, but that was a great tool to go, look, nobody even caught it. You recovered so well that sometimes we focus on the mistake and not what they do with the mistake. Right. And so that creates this fear of mistake, fear of you're going to yell at me about the mistake. You know what I mean? And
And I
so,
think that's part of it too. I
yeah,
just have to jump in there. I think that they want their teacher to be so proud of what they're doing. They don't want, they feel like if they get any, even if it's constructive, any kind of criticism, they're like, oh, I'm a failure. He hates
right,
me.
right.
I can't do this. Mike,
Hey,
did you
Derek.
feel that way?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in with kind of a different perspective on that because I agree with you. But I find that perfectionist type kids, those superstars, they're very highly critical of themselves. And I think a really important skill that I found that I could teach them, because I had to learn it myself, was to simply accept a compliment. Because if you have a soloist and then at the end of the performance you go, man, Derrick, you did a great job on that solo. Yeah, except for the D was a little bit flat on it. And then I did this and I shouldn't have cut that half note off. And then I would stop them and go, listen carefully, Derrick, my trumpet player, listen carefully. You did a great job on the solo. Can you just accept the compliment? And I
Yeah,
got that from a band parent where the band parent said, hey, the band looked good. They did this. And I'm like, oh, yeah, but we've got to get this done. And she stopped me and go, Mike, can you not just accept a compliment? And I think that's an important skill when you see those superstars because it is that dichotomy of what you're talking about. They don't want the director to yell at them or even point out anything
right.
wrong.
Yeah,
But in their mind, they're thinking 1,000 things wrong. And if you say, you did a good job, to them, if they agree with you, then what they think they're doing is saying, I am so dumb. I have no idea what I'm doing on my horn, and I don't even realize my mistakes. That's what they feel is being projected. So
yeah.
we've got to teach them to simply and tell them just that way. I said, can you not just accept a compliment? And then we can go practice some more. It's okay.
Yeah, that's really great. And I agree 100%. You
Yeah.
know, what stems off of that also is if a student 100% trusts the director with a criticism or a compliment, if you can get that bond set, that really helps. In other words, they know you're telling them the truth. In other words, you're not sugarcoating things, or because they want they want true comments, they want true criticism of themselves. They don't want. I felt like as a student, and this was just the time. I loved all my directors; they were all great, but they would ride me into the dirt. You know what I mean? And I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. I mean, and they pushed me as hard as they could push. You
Mike, what
know,
you're saying, you beat them into a first division.
That's right.
yeah. Hey, on the marching field, I was doing the solo stuff. I mean, jazz. I mean, they were. It was brutal.
Yeah. Hey, but
Uh,
there's times too where you have to treat them like the field goal kicker on a football team. I had
yep.
an area marching prelims, and I had my perfectionist trumpet player, and the solo sucked. I mean, they just blew it, and they came off the field and they were looking at the. I walked over to them and they were looking down at the track, and I said, first thing, hold your head up.
Yep.
Said, do not look at the ground. And then I told them, said, the band was great. We're going to have another chance to do this. Leave that behind you. As Ted Lasso says, have the memory of a goldfish.
Yep. Yep.
So
Exactly.
it's that again dichotomy kind of thing. We want to tell them everything that we need improved, but there's also times you got to kind of put your arm on their shoulder and go, it's okay to play poorly at times.
Right. But I'm going to say this, Rusty, yes, no. that's a perfect example of a perfectionist thinks that their mistake is going to cost the entire group.
Oh,
They let the
100%.
Oh,
entire
that's
group
right.
Yeah.
down, that
Yeah.
we
Hey,
failed and it's all my
Yeah,
fault.
we're not going to go to finals. We're not going to have a chance to go to state, whatever, honor band, because I blew it. You
well,
know,
you guys know what I'm about to talk about. Charles, Pines of Rome. At the end of Pines of Rome, there's that fivelet going up to high D, dee, 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 da, da, right? And it goes up to high D. And I'm in high school, and Charles Nell literally looked at me, and he's my favorite favorite director of all time.
We all love Charles.
Great
We know.
music,
Yeah.
yes. But he said this. He goes, if you crack that note, it'll ruin the whole concert.
So what are you thinking about for an hour?
Right. I've got all these other things in Pines of Rome to worry about, and I'm worried about this last note. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. But that trust, and now I love Charles Nell is my favorite. I bet I learned more from him than any human. I mean, not just band director. He was just such a great role model.
So I'm going to sidetrack this for a minute. Tell Rusty your Charles Neal story when Will was in your band.
Oh, which one? I mean, not
when
which
he
Will, but
sat
which
on the
story?
sideline and you went to, so you know his grandson, Rusty, Will, teaches in Greenwood now.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But he was in your band, right, Mike?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. He's now at
And,
Greenwood as an assistant
and so I
band
think you
director.
were at a competition somewhere and you did
Oh,
prelims and
yeah. Yeah. He was in charge. He was the area coordinator for it. So he passes out the sheets and we all get our stuff. And we happened to end up first in prelims that day. And then he didn't say a word. He didn't come up to me to say anything.
you know
And
the
he
Charles
waited.
look. He's just leaning up against the fence
Oh,
watching what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
And so all the other directors leave the press box, and I'm standing there and I go, "Hey, Charles, tell me what I need to work on between now and finals." He goes, "Oh, thank God you asked." And he goes, "Do this,
He wasn't going to.
this." Yeah,
He
he
wasn't
wasn't
going to
going
walk
to
up to Mike
interfere.
and
No.
say,
No,
But everything he said was gold nuggets, man. We worked on. He goes, "Now you don't have time to fix this. If you happen to make it to state somehow, so you'll have a week to work on that. But so don't worry about it right now." And we ended up winning that area championship that day. But a lot of it goes to him helping me. But what a gentleman, knowing
Oh,
that
yeah. Yeah.
when
but
is it
see,
time to point out mistakes? When is it time just to be grandpa?
Oh, right. Just sit back. Right.
so
To
he
be
didn't tell
grandpa.
Mike, if you miss that note,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he knew that would drive me also.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I
he
mean,
knew
he
you. That's
he
the
knew
thing.
me. That's exactly right. He knew that, and I didn't miss it. I
Yeah.
mean, I did, but he, you know, um, yeah,
But see, I
he's
want to do this real quick. Rusty, you got me going here, and I'm going to have to stop interrupting. But Rusty and I are contemporaries in the same region in high school. And this may make you laugh. It may make you think, man, y'all are sad. I went to a very competitive, we had a very competitive high schools. His high school and my school, so competitive. And we both had pretty good players. But we would, it seems like Rusty always made all state orchestra on trumpet. And we were like, oh, thank God, there's another spot for the rest of us. We were happy that he went to the orchestra route. The
Yeah.
rest of us went with the band route. So I don't know if you ever. That's true though. You always made all state
no,
orchestra. Or
I
had,
didn't make orchestra. I think it was just once. Yeah, I just
well, I remember all of us going. Whew,
yeah,
there's a
Yeah.
spot for us."
yeah.
But
You know,
anyway,
that was weird. Yeah, that brings back a lot of memories there. It was a great. That was Odessa Midland heyday, right? I mean,
I thought you
it
said
was so
hate,
cool.
and I was like, that's true too.
Heyday. Yeah, it was
Well,
a
as
great
long as you
night.
guys don't go to the situation of Tanya Harding and start hiring people to break
Hey,
knees or
You
something.
would
We-
be amazed what things that happen.
we had
Hit
tackle.
someone in the face to destroy an embouchure.
We had tackle football Saturdays with all the bands.
Oh
It
Lord,
was
that just
brutal.
It was
Hey,
brutal. And
you
Charles
could have a
Hale,
hitman involved.
I broke a collarbone
Oh.
like 2 weeks before state, and I didn't tell him. And I just picked up my horn and I did not tell. Because he would always tell us, "You better not get hurt. You better not get hurt."
As soon as
And
somebody gets
Yeah.
hurt, it's over.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I broke my collarbone that year. Oh my gosh! I
So
think it
this
was
is something we don't normally do on this podcast. Another one of the great trumpet players from that region and that time period just walked by. I happen to be married to her, and she says, "Hey, butthead." So
there we go.
The love is overwhelming.
Yeah. Speaking of, I'm going to be nice. Speaking of beautiful sounds on cornet, she had the prettiest sound you could
oh
have.
wow, you
probably.
just dated all of us on cornet.
No, but
I have to
Bill,
tell her. Hold on. He said he in front of this whole audience just said you had one of the prettiest sounds on cornet he ever heard or remembers. And she said, "What do you want?"
yeah, but because wasn't she on Elsa's with the Bill Dean recording? I think that's right.
Did you play the solo on Elsa? Did you play on Elsa's processional?
Wasn't that it?
Manzoni was her big deal.
Oh, that's it. That's it. Manzoni. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, she needs to go away so we can jump back into Perfectionist. Speaking of,
Actually, the only reason I said that is so she felt bad about calling me a butthead. So there you go.
so
All right, back on track.
Let me wrap this back in, or let me kind of steer us back into this. So here's the deal: we know we've got them out there. We've talked a little bit about their mentality, but something I don't know that we all think about is what do we, Mike? What's the wooden quote? I don't love everybody this, or I don't treat everybody the same.
That's right.
I love everybody the same, but I don't treat everybody the same.
I treat everyone equal, but that means not the same.
And so here I am. I'm I'm the only director here. I'm doing beginners. I'm doing middle school. I'm doing high school. Excuse me. And I recognize this talent, but you guys correct me. I'm going to do 50, depending on the size of my band. I'm just using 50 for an easy number. I'm going to do 49 kids a disservice if I pay too much attention to one kid. Or do I do that one kid a disservice by just pretending like he's not what he is or she's not what she is? Or what do I do? This is actually my question today. Mike,
Okay.
Rusty, what do I do to teach the whole, knowing that there's a kid there that could be awesome?
Yeah.
And
I
is
tell you
awesome.
what,
I
I'll
don't
throw in
mean-
my 2 cents on it. I always tried with beginner band, especially beginning brass class. I taught to the middle of the section. I focused probably 90% of my effort was on the middle of the section. And the way I rationalized that, and I thought this was the best way to help my superstar, was then I would have my superstar work with a kid, because I might have like 35 beginning trumpets, so I'd have the superstar work with the kid who was at the bottom that couldn't quite have enough range and say, hey, can you take Sarah into my office over there and kind of work on some range things? I found that the easiest way to create, because perfectionists have low self-esteem. That's what it is. Well, perfectionists have low self-esteem. So the only way to build that up is to make them a teacher. And all of a sudden they're helping out a kid and being of service to that kid, and they leave the room going, hey, Mr. Lenny, they played a C on third space. Said they've never done that before. And they kind of swag on out the room. You know what I mean? So it becomes them helping someone else instead of them dwelling on their own thing. So if I taught to the middle and made the top portion help the bottom portion, then pretty soon the bottom portion started to filter into the middle. And it helped me keep the top portion all the way through high school. Because those kids I started were my seniors 7 years later. So those were my brass players in the marching band 7 years later as seniors. So they understood how to teach because I taught them how to teach in sixth grade. So I just throw that in for my own.
But I'm going to clarify this. You're saying you kind of try to mentally make a midpoint to pull some up and keep others at least still interested. I know you're talking about the teaching side, but
yeah, and I feel like as a teacher, it's hard for me to pull the weaker players up nearly as quickly as it is for one of their peers to pull them up quickly.
I can follow that thought. Okay.
And it helps because high achievers have high self-esteem. Perfectionists have low self-esteem. That's just a fact. So you've got to feed that somehow. They've got a low self-esteem. How can I make them feel better, but not worry about their playing? Now they're worried about Sarah's playing.
Oh, grasshopper.
Yeah, no, Yeah, that's actually a ministry. That's actually what you do, try to do in ministry. You try to get everybody to think about somebody else,
Right.
because we become this me society. And if I can get you to, if I can start thinking about over here, I don't concentrate on me as much.
That's right. Servant
I know it.
leadership.
100%
Yeah.
accurate. Very good. Very, very good. Uh, I think with the superstar, uh, what you've got to try to do first is they you they've got to start excelling also. In other words, they can't get stagnant. If they get stagnant, they get all what you're talking about. We're not feeling good about ourselves. It's not working, And so I'm going to go try art now because I don't like the way I feel here. I was fortunate that I was around always in my career really great lesson teachers, and I understand that I probably in the minority on that one, right? But I know of a lot of instances where I was even asked to in Odessa to go teach somebody like in Kermit, just hey, give so and so some lessons, or they're going to come to you. And uh, I do believe that there are people out there willing to help anybody. You know what I mean? As far as let's get some lessons going, let's get this person some individual attention that they need that they're not going to get in class, right? I mean, they
outside
need,
the classroom. Yeah.
yeah. And I would do the trumpet world, yeah, and I would do the brass world. But I mean, if I had a great flute player, I can't teach them what they need.
That's right. I
Now,
feel you.
yeah, yeah. Nowadays, they've got so you've got online lessons now. I mean, you can find an avenue now. And I will say this: if it was a financial issue, I would find a way to make that work. I would find money for that kid. Luckily, I was in schools that would, if there were any funds available, they would give them to me because the kids need them. And even though I'm in Coppell, everybody thinks everybody in Coppell is rolling in money. No, there were financial issues there
Oh
also.
yeah.
Odessa had more when I was there, but we would spend. I taught in Highland Park for a while, and we would spend all of our money, though, all of our raised money on teachers mainly. 80% of our budget would go into teachers, not things. Teachers. Teachers teach the kids. They feel better about themselves. And then all of a sudden, all these problems we're talking about get better and better and better. Not to mention retention gets better.
Hey, let me ask you to do something for me, Rusty. And I just left a big gap in case we decide to edit this out. Tell us about the teacher and how you evolved from the point of uh, you had a bunch of flute players that took private lessons, and it's like the only way you knew who are you taking from? We take from the teacher.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have a particular set of skills.
There in Coppell, there was one flute guru, and I never knew her name. All the kids called it the teacher. They called her the teacher.
I love
And
that.
all I know is they would go off to the teacher and come back and be incredible. So I
You're
like,
say the results made it where you didn't have
Yeah.
to know their name.
I know it's like you're the teacher.
That's awesome.
And the teacher was the teacher, and there was a waiting list for the teacher. And but any of the kids that got in with the teacher became all state caliber players. I
Oh,
mean,
nice.
it was like because she wouldn't just take anybody. If you got in with the teacher, I don't know if she's still there or not. I don't think she is because
I just thought that was the greatest story.
That is awesome. You got to leave that in.
Yeah, the teacher.
What an honor to be known as the teacher.
The teacher,
That would
yeah.
be such an honor.
The-
That'd just be my business card.
Yeah,
Who
the
are you?
teacher.
I am the teacher. Call me at this number.
You know, for years, I never considered myself a teacher. I never did. I consider myself a musician. I never, ever, in fact, probably until the last 4 or 5 years of my teaching, that I even told people I consider myself a musician first, 100%. I'm not a teacher. I'm a musician. And I just, show examples of what kids to do, which I'm given a definition of a teacher at this point. But right, so but I never did because I always thought I
But
was.
that's not how you identified necessarily.
No, I
Yeah.
didn't. I identified as because I was doing the church world still. Everything I did was about music and it's as a musician. Uh, and when I got, and this is not a, when I got teacher of the year one time, I kind of went, hey, they're calling me a teacher. I went, but
Musician
then,
of the year.
yeah, no, and I kind of went, well, I guess I am. I mean, it took me a while to realize just because I didn't do what everybody else did, I tried to do things my own way. Scott Mason was a big part of that, by the way. And him and I were a great team also. I loved working for Scott, learning how to be a teacher and then, realizing that, I am teaching, I am thinking about teaching the top kid. I am taught. To me, the last year kid's just as important as the top kid. And I used to, and it would drive me crazy. I think your thoughts of teaching the middle is more probably the way it should be done. And maybe I was doing that more, but I tried to teach everybody. And I think you did too. I'm not saying that, but
Right.
everybody was so important. My heart would break for losing the last year kid, even if I lost the first year kid.
Okay, but let's pause for a minute. Are you speaking in terms of value as an individual? Are you speaking in terms of value to the organization, to the group? What?
Both. I'm talking both because I really believe that last year kid. Now, some of the high school directors didn't like this about me because they would get a kid and say, "Why is he still in band?" I'm going, because he's going to carry that prop great for you, man.
And he loves being here.
And he loves being here. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're going to love him. And then they would usually come back to me. There was a couple kids, maybe not, but they'd come back to me and say, "You're right. He's a great kid." Yeah. And, you have 9 bands in Coppell or whatever. And he did fine in the 9th band,
What do you
he's
call those,
fine.
Mike? The retrievers?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the Golden Retrievers of band. Yeah.
But,
They'll
I'm
do
going to,
anything you ask.
I'll
Yes, sir.
circle
I
it.
do it, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's right. I'll circle it back around too. When you're talking about gaining trust from the perfectionist, right? Because the perfectionist needs your trust. They need to know what you're going to tell them is real. And that helps the perfectionist. And if you're telling the last year kid and helping that last year kid, and they're hearing what you're saying to them, and you're being honest about, you don't sound very good right now. and we need to do this, and not backing off that last year kid. In other words, that same, but going down everybody and telling them what's real and getting that trust with the band about, I'm telling you what I'm hearing. I am not making this up. I'm not going to sugarcoat. I'm going to tell you in a most loving way I can that sucks. But
See,
then again, this is great.
This is great.
Yeah.
We can't stop that. And Mike, help me, because what I'm hearing you say is that the for lack of a better term, superstar perfectionist wants to know that you're not lying to them about how good they are when they see you lie to somebody or just go, never, nah, it's fine, move on to the next.
Right.
Instead of that same expectation level, everybody makes a good sound.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whatever that means for you, maybe maybe that factors into it. You do the best you can. I'm not going to let you.
Yeah. And I
Right.
tell you what, and talk about different career paths and how we identify as band directors. In our time era, there was a lot of hot natured band directors. You know what I
What?
mean? Just yellers and that kind of thing. But of all strangeness, my junior high, my high school, my lesson teacher, my college, my DCI experience, every single one of those people were very compassionate and they helped us and they were very nurturing. And honestly, the first time I ever saw a band director yell at a band was when I went to go clinic a group, and I was stunned. I went to go clinic, and I was thinking, what the hell? Well, what are they doing yelling at the band? What good is that going to do? And I just never experienced that. So I think in a way, kind of like you identified as a musician, I always identified as a teacher because to me that was the higher calling, which was more important than being a musician. And they're not one's right, one's wrong. It's just how we live our life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I guarantee you, when I became a teacher as a band director, I didn't go in as a musician. And I feel like I did fairly well on my horn, and I still play to this day. But I was a teacher, and I think it's a noble profession, and it's really interesting to me how if you approach it as a teacher, you actually approach those perfectionists in a different way than if you're from what I've seen clinic and groups, than if you're a band director that just rails on kids. And I've seen two different aspects to that. One is if a band director just rails on kids in a rehearsal, the perfectionist will do one of two things. One, they'll either shut down because they don't want to be a part of said railing. Number two, they'll just take the band director's side. And I've seen kids in rehearsal look over at the rest of their section. If y'all would just shut up and do what they say, we could do this. And and it's like, what are we doing here? I thought this was just an activity to make music. I didn't know this. I didn't know we were going to war. Where's my weapon? Kind of thing. So I just wanted to throw that in, that it's interesting how people come up and they, I guess, long story short, too late for that. We tend to become our band directors.
What's modeled for us, right?
Yeah, just like we tend to become our parents. How many times have you guys said something to your kids and thought, "Oh my God, my dad just spoke"? Yeah. And we do the same thing, so we all have to find our path on that. But I feel like the idea of the perfectionist, to keep them involved in the band, it does take a lot of teaching them how to handle their issue, just as much as a kid who's impoverished.
Yep.
We have to handle their issue as well.
Rusty, I want you to respond, but I want to say this first. Mike and I have had this saying before, and you probably relate to it, that back, we're all of a certain age. And back when we were young at this, it seems like our mentors, Mike has said this so many times, they really didn't care that much about your feelings.
Yeah. Nope. Yeah.
They were just going to tell you exactly how it was. And to say to Mike that I know that Rusty and I have a common experience of, it was much more militaristic in approach when we were in junior high and high school. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh no, you're exactly right. And my biggest mistake as a young teacher was trying to be just what Mike said, trying to be my teacher. In other words, trying to be Charles Nell. Charles Nell had the ability to yell at you and make you feel good at the same time. I have no idea how he did it. Right? He would just tear you.
Yell some more, sir?
Yeah. It was the weirdest thing. It's like, he's yelling at me, but I feel good. How is that happening?
Yeah.
But
and it's okay.
And I learned some great things from them. J.R. McIntyre taught me that, and this was a great lesson. If you ever got after a kid for some reason in front of everybody. Now I stopped that, and I'll talk about that here in a second. If it was a bad conflict in front of everybody, you found that kid before the end of the day and you fixed it.
Mm-hmm.
You find it and you take care of it. But I never allowed that to happen. I would separate before that happened. Towards probably my last 10 years, I would just separate. If we're having a conflict here, hey, let's go to my office. And then I had a rule: when I shut that door, you can say anything to me and let's have a real talk. But I never aired laundry. I mean, there was an old saying that a mama bird doesn't poop in her own nest, kind of a thing. Yeah. There's a time to let's separate. I became a totally different director, probably my last 18 years, where I started being a lot more calm, and all of a sudden my retention got better. All of a sudden everything got better. Yeah, I know.
Cause and effect.
Yeah. I'm going to just dive into recruiting real quick. In Coppell, they took away, some electives and stuff like that. And so for a time when we're used to 120 people in our recruiting classes, somewhere like that, which I think that's the perfect number if you can get lucky. But I was ending up with 80, 82. And I was devastated. I think, how are we going to do this? But with me being a little different, teaching better, all of a sudden my retention, my band size didn't go down. I was retaining 95% of my kids.
That's right.
I was getting the kids in band that wanted to be in band.
Right.
The atmosphere was better. They were playing better. It was like, oh, wow. Now, I did have a class of 130 once, and they were like that too. They were all in the right place, and that was a great feeling. That was great. These people trying to recruit everybody that moves and breathes I don't know how they do it. after I've been through what I've been through, and when the atmosphere is better, all of a sudden everything's better, right? And
Mhm.
but pulling the kids out for discipline issues, I mean, this is all, and that helps that kid shutting down too, because a lot of time your perfectionists, they're gonna buck you a little bit.
Oh yeah.
They're gonna come back. They're strong individuals usually, and they're gonna say things they don't mean just to get out of maybe playing in front of people, which I did back off the older I got too. I would have recordings come in, and as opposed to playing in front, the rehearsal was for rehearsing.
Mhm.
I didn't do individual stuff a lot, which a lot of people criticized me for towards the end. J.R. McIntyre wouldn't like that either. He thinks you need to hear every individual almost every day, right? They do something down the road, but I
Well,
stopped doing that.
I do really. That's such a healthy way to handle those issues that happen in rehearsal. My band was really used to the idea that I would just stop, and someone kid said something, I'd go, "Well, let's just talk about that after band,"
Yeah.
and I'd just go on. And the band was used to that because I always tell my student teachers, and this goes out to any of those listeners out there that are younger band directors or maybe even older band directors. If you argue with a student in front of the band, you might win the argument, quote, during rehearsal, but you've lost
You've
because every
lost.
other kid's going, why is he wasting his time
And
arguing
ours.
with this kid?
Yeah.
And why is he wasting the whole band's time? And so it just became just a normal thing. And then pretty soon the kids wouldn't buck up as much because they didn't want to waste their time coming to talk to me. And then, like you said, Rusty, I
Yep.
was going to chase them down third period and find out where they were in third
Yep.
period and say, hey, we've got to talk. So they knew there was going to
Yep.
be some time involved. So they would just kind of maybe bite their tongue. And in terms of recruiting, you're so on point because shocker here, those kids talk to each other.
Yep.
And if your kids are in youth group and Sunday school and lunch and football and softball, and they go, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing band next year." Oh, he's a jerk.
Yep.
You don't need to be. Or they go, "Man, he really does it. He really cares about what we're doing. He even
Yep.
shows up at a softball game sometimes."
Yep.
You know what I mean? So those kids talk and those parents talk. So how you approach those kids and those perfectionists are super important.
Yep.
Okay.
I was going to say to Mike's point, we've said this before that band kids hang out with band kids in the cafeteria, Friday nights. That so there are no secrets
Oh yeah. And I'll
between.
go one step further. In my humble opinion, which you can get a cup of coffee with $5 with, um, perfectionist, a lot of times at the highest level of being a perfectionist, they do hang out with bad kids. But I will say they're also loners.
Yeah,
They will,
I agree
if
with
you
that.
get to a football stadium and you're feeding them hamburgers before the game, you'll see that one clarinet player sitting off by themselves. That's the perfectionist. And there's that sense of isolation because they depress themselves. So with my
Because
leadership team, what I did in leadership was I said, no one eats alone. So the leadership sees someone sitting by themselves, and they all 20 of them would swarm over with their hamburgers and just sit around that person, and maybe not even engage at first, just proximity, and then somehow pull them back in. But there's such a weird uh, kryptonite to being a perfectionist that I call that isolation depression,
you
loner mentality.
it's interesting too. On the opposite end of the spectrum, sometimes they'll be the ones that do everything. They try to
Yes.
do, in other words, so you're right. One of my best students, I mean, I can remember a couple of years ago, I retired a couple of years ago. She was awesome, but she was the one that dressed funny. She was
That's right.
interesting. I loved her. I loved her character, but she was a loner. She was
Yeah.
definitely 100.
Yeah.
But then some of them they want to do everything to this perfect level, right?
Hmm.
So they're all going, well, I can do football and I can do this and I can do this and I'm going to do it all. And they burn themselves to the point they're about to explode, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny how that is an extreme, but that is true.
Yeah.
Uh,
And your least perfectionist kid will be the class clown and
Yep.
the middle of everything. And
yeah,
you know what I mean? They're the one, always brings the football to practice, even though it's
yeah,
concert band.
that's right. That's right. Yeah,
So that kid's in the middle of the social butterflies.
You mean
yeah,
the trombones?
Yeah, the
yeah.
trombones, but they can be anybody. It's absolutely hilarious to watch them operate. I think one of my greatest joys is just watching kids interact and helping them learn how to interact. And the second greatest joy is making music. I mean, yeah, we did the Giannini Symphony, we did blah blah blah, but just watch them interact on a bus and just be stupid is really cool.
Their
You know,
Well,
teach
community.
them how to be humans.
well, you haven't lived until you've had a bus full of, and this was Coppell shifted at one point, and we had to learn new cultures. I taught at a school that had 80% Asian Indians for a
Mhm.
while, and I learned a whole new culture, and it was, you're right, that was the most fun I'd had in a long time
Yeah.
because they were just, they were quirky in a different way. And
Just
if you
quirky
know,
funny.
yeah, the Indian culture, they don't, like, if you turn on music in the band hall, they'll start dancing.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, the boys are just
No inhibitions.
none. It's just like, you look really silly right now. They didn't care. It was like, okay, whatever. You're right. That was, to me, that was just the most fun, was actually getting to watch
The
those cultures
community,
interact.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I did have a parent call me one time and say, "Hey, Mr. Gray, could you move your concert because I'm going to be out of town, and I need you to move your concert to next week. Would that be okay?" And I'm going, because he was just asking, if it's a
Yeah. Why
possibility,
not?
why not? And
Yeah.
I went, well, no, because everybody's got it on their calendar. And he went, oh, okay. And then he goes, well, could you rehearse tomorrow so I can come listen? I'm going, no, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in and steer. Okay.
Okay,
Okay. Yeah.
steer
Sorry.
us because we're chasing the
Sorry.
rabbit.
Yeah.
But I do think you bring up a great point, because how I kind of want to hope we wrap this up is it is possible to teach every level of kid that you have in your group,
Mhm.
and it doesn't take that much extra preparation on your part. But at the same, and you guys disagree if you want to, that's great. I'm leaving it there. But what I am saying is the point I think we've just made without intending to is sometimes you just have to figure out the right way or the right uh, to create understanding.
Mhm. A better level of communication.
That's a good thing
Yeah.
to say. You have
And
to learn how to communicate to the high achiever, to the perfectionist, and to the I just love band
yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
at the
and,
same time.
and different cultures and different yeah,
Right.
it's I think band is what you have to do, and you got to change. I mean, if you're not changing, you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Or if you're not growing,
Uh,
and that's
yeah,
change.
yeah, you're because I became a better teacher. Now, some people would say my product wasn't as good, but the kids were better, I think.
Then the
Towards
product
the
was good.
Yeah, and but I was a lot better teacher towards the end than I was at the very beginning. A lot better. I kind of wish, we had people talking about this, saying it's okay to teach differently, and it's okay to be your own self. It's okay, as you approach kids. There, we were very black and white. You do this in my classroom when I first started, as opposed to saying, "Oh, I've got this kid with these needs, and this kid with these needs, and this kid," and it can work. You can actually make it work.
Mhm.
So, it, to me, that's the biggest thing to get, that we treat that perfectionist one way, we treat the high achiever one way, we treat just the average great kid one way. Right? There's going to be these kids that just work hard, and they're just awesome kids, and they're just, and they'll be the heart of your band sometimes.
Oh, yes.
And you know what? Sometimes that last year kid is your funniest kid, and he's the best kid, and he keeps your camaraderie going. He keeps
The minister
he
of culture.
yeah, yeah, uh, so you get it all, and you can teach it all. So
Amen, brother.
yeah, yeah,
Okay. So let's synopsis. Let me bullet point this real quick. You probably have some different levels in your group, young director. Don't be afraid of either end. It takes all of us, and we're talking about teaching different and talking different and different motivators. But I think that you don't have to do another master's thesis to be able to reach both ends. You just have to acknowledge, and you have to figure out how. Mike, I love what you said about uh, giving these high end guys, the perfectionists, the opportunity to let somebody else get better.
Hmm.
Let them help you make everybody else better, and you're fulfilling something in them they didn't even know, because the end result of that is more cohesion, more sense of belonging, more sense of we're a group instead of, and listen, individuals are individuals. I'm kind of an individual in a lot of cases. But we all fit. We all belong. We all have a place. And I think that, Rusty, you would agree that one of the biggest jobs we have in this profession of music education is to make sure that everybody feels seen, everybody feels like they have something to contribute.
And everyone feels safe. In other words,
Yeah.
it's a
Yes.
comfortable, safe place in your band hall.
It's safe to make a mistake.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm going to be real careful because I may be the absolute minority on this. I shy away from you. That's exactly what I wanted to say. I've gotten, culturally, I just don't use the word safe very often anymore because it seems to wave a flag.
Yeah.
But
It could. Yeah.
but your point is the same. We have to feel safe
Mhm.
before we can be who we really are.
Exactly. And it helps that top kid, man, especially the perfectionist, when they feel safe and they know they can trust you, man, that's a huge thing. Huge.
Right. I agree. Mike, anything you want to throw in there? Did I
No,
summarize
man,
well?
I like the summarization. Hey, it's been good to meet you, Rusty.
Very nice to meet you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation, been a lot of fun. I don't know if anyone's going to listen, but we had a good time.
Hey, we had a good time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what counts.
But we're not here for trophies.
We're not here for trophies. That's
We're not
right.
here for trophies.
That's right. That's right.
Well, you guys have fantastic weeks. Rusty, we'll try not to think bad thoughts as you stare off at the Smoky Mountains and see the mist coming over. Well,
Yeah.
you'll be on your tractor, so
Hey, here in Abilene, I've got a little hill I can look at.
Yeah. Guys, it's absolutely beautiful here right now.
Oh, man.
And I look over to the Smoky Mountains right off my front porch. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
okay, you didn't have to just keep rubbing.
I am.
Man,
Yeah. All right.
You guys have a great week.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
thanks, guys.